Welcome to this week's edition of Readings in Theological German. If you missed last week, you probably want to go check it out because we've started a new little project here. I'm translating a whole entire article from German into English, doing pretty big chunks at a time. And so we did a whole paragraph last week. I'm going to do 2 paragraphs today, and I hope you find this all very helpful. So the article we're working through here is this one by Georg Steins. And, well, I got to clear something up first. I wonder if I caused any controversy with my translation of this word in the title last time, Priesterherrschaft. Well, first of all, for those new to the channel, I'm not German and I can't speak it, so I just kind of make up pronunciation as I go. So I do appreciate all of your grace and forgiveness and things like that. But anyways, there might have been some controversy here because I translated it as priesthood. However, you may know that the normal word for priesthood in German is simply Priesterschaft. And that kind of makes sense because you've got priest up here and then you put Schaft on the end, a very common way of kind of making abstract types of nouns in German. And so Priesterschaft would be priesthood, but that's not quite what we have over here. Here you see that there is an extra word in here, Herr. And so it's not Priesterschaft. In fact, the best way probably to divide this up as a compound word would be to say it's a priester. Okay, so that's your first word, and then Herrschaft is the abstract noun. And Herrschaft means a kind of rule or something like that. Anyways, yeah, like the rule, the administration of a rule in a state or something. And so really this should probably be translated as a priestly rule rather than a priesthood, but hopefully that didn't cause too much trouble for anybody. But anyways, the title of this article that we're working on here is The Priestly Rule, People of Priests, or What Else? Toward an Interpretation of Exodus 19:6 by Georg Steins. And we are in the introduction, but we're going to jump down to the second paragraph and pick it up where we left off last time. So just for context from last week, recall that we are reading here about Exodus 19:1-8 as kind of the beginning passage within the Sinai pericope that goes all the way to Numbers 10. So here it says, one of, that's a genitive article there, so one of the central statements, however, and then here you have a separable verb, so pay attention here down at the end of the clause. You want to look for any sort of dangling components, okay? So this is darstellen. In this context, it's going to be something like presents or poses or something like that. So one of the central sayings or statements, however, poses an especially persistent problem of interpretation. The expression mmlkt khnim, that's Hebrew for well, you'll see here what it's Hebrew for in a second. Mmlkt khnim in 19:6a, literally, quote, a kingdom / a royal rule of priests. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. You're going to notice something about this author. He does a lot of this kind of thing. These kinds of I guess you could say abbreviated, like, so this little clause here, well, it's not really a clause, it's kind of a phrase. He has a lot of kind of like offset phrases in his sentences. And so you just got to kind of watch out for that. And you can usually get by them by just being pretty literal in your translation and just kind of going like, oh, okay, he's just kind of like adding, modifying to what he's already been saying. And so these kind of things, when you translate them and write them out, they tend to flow a little better when you're reading them because we do the similar kinds of things in English. Okay, this next sentence is very long. It takes us to the end of the paragraph on the next page. And before I get into it, I want to just quickly point out that we will be dealing with a few subjunctive verbs. And so the first one you can see here, and there's more on the next page. Subjunctive verbs are being used in this particular case because this author is referring to someone else and things that they have said. And in German, when you do that, often you use subjunctive verbs to communicate what the other person has said because, as you know, subjunctive verbs kind of defer certainty in some sense about the process that's being construed. And so what you're doing when you're quoting someone else is you're kind of taking off the liability because now it can't be said that you accused them of saying something that they didn't say because you just accused them of saying something that could be the thing that you're saying it was. So, German's wonderful that way. Of course, we actually do similar things in English, but we just have different strategies. But German has this in their verbal system, and so that's why they use it. But the point is, when you translate them, you're just going to translate them probably somehow in a way that's consistent with whatever the normal verbs are in the rest of the sentence. And so in this case, I think this author is kind of using present tense, and so these will all just get translated as present tense as well. So you won't hear a special verb in English for them. But anyways, so hopefully that kind of helps you to see what we're going to do with those verbs. Okay, here goes. How difficult this combination of words is to interpret. Now, you might be noticing here that your sein verb is at the end of the clause, and you're saying, now, why would that be? Because, shouldn't the verb be in second position here to start off the sentence? Well, actually, this whole first clause here is a subordinate clause. You've got this relativizing pronoun here, and so it's all subordinate. So the first thing in the sentence is a subordinate clause, and so then in second position, lo and behold, there is your conjugated verb, and it's a modal auxiliary, so it's können, and so as a modal, it picks up an infinitive complement at the end of that clause, and so you're going to want to translate that accordingly. This man is the subject, and so it's going to be one can see, except often it's better to translate these as passives in English. It's just kind of more of a convention that we would probably use in English, but the sense is the same. So how difficult this combination of words is to interpret can be seen, for example, in the fact that J.L. Ska at the Colloquium Biblicum Lovaniese 1995 has represented, you could pick any kind of synonym you want here, espoused, has taken the view that the expression, that is the expression up here, mmlkt khnim, means, and there's your subjunctive, okay, so we're not accusing him of saying that it means anything, but it might mean, okay, that's the idea, means a kingdom, okay. So that's kind of the first little part of the sentence, and then there'll be some more on the next page, but I just want to point out quickly that your conjugated verb in this clause is at the end. Okay, and so that's because this is all a subordinate clause, and so the conjugated verb is at the end. It's an auxiliary verb which helps you set up a perfect construction, and so you have vertreten as a participle comes just before it in order to make perfect. Okay, so how difficult this combination of words is to interpret can be seen, for example, in the fact that J.L. Ska at the Colloquium Biblicum Lovaniese 1995 has represented the view or opinion that the expression means a kingdom. Now you have here whose, okay, so hold on to that, whose, and you'll have to kind of remember this, whose Angehörige, so whose members are all priests. Again, your verb here is sein at the end of the clause because this is not a main clause and it is subjunctive as well. Then you have another subjunctive verb here, again referring back to that expression, and so the first kind of clause there is saying the expression means a kingdom whose members are all priests, and the expression qualifies more precisely the entire people as priestly. Meanwhile, in the print version of his contribution, appearing in 1996, he takes the view that the expression designates a kingdom under the rule of priests, designating thus only the ruling class as priests, but one should nevertheless prefer the translation priestly kingdom, or in Latin, royaume. I don't know how to pronounce Latin. So, okay, well, that was a really intense sentence. I want to point out one thing, though, that's very important here at the end, which is that you see this here, modal auxiliary, okay? One should prefer, so you got your infinitive down there. But that modal auxiliary, sola, is still subjunctive. And so that actually kind of helps you here with a bit of ambiguity, because this last clause, but one should prefer the translation priestly kingdom, you might think that that is Stein's, the author of this article, making that claim in contrast to whatever this person that he's referring to has said. However, because it's still subjunctive, then he's actually still indicating what this other person has said. And so he seems to be saying that what Ska has done is he kind of said one view in his presentation, and then when he published the same article a year later, he kind of switched and clarified that it should mean something slightly different, but that he also, in that article, nevertheless said that he wanted to prefer the translation priestly kingdom, even though he was now saying that it was only sort of the rulers who were the priests within the kingdom. Anyway, so you can see it's a very complicated sentence, and when you're translating into English, you probably want to break it up into more than one sentence to make it clear what's going on. And in fact, I have put an English translation of today's whole episode down in the description of the video, so do check that out. Ska's determined both and. This is a stock expression in German that you just need to get used to seeing, and it just translates like the English expression, both and. His determined both and leaves, okay, this is a simple sentence. There's your verb in second position, and now your object, leaves the readers a little behind at a loss. Okay, here's something interesting, which really, I don't know what this has to do with translation exactly, but I just want to point out the English privilege that exists in the whole debate over gender pronouns, especially when it comes to, you know, non-binary gender and things like that. Look what's going on here in German. You've got two expressions for readers because there's a feminine and a masculine form here, right? And so he's using gender inclusive language, which is great, and that's wonderful. But just think, you know, there's an English privilege in the whole conversation because it's very simple for us to think about something like a non-binary pronoun. But in a language like German, you would have to come up with non-binary versions of like basically every paradigm that there was, all the articles and the different forms of all the nouns. And so you can see how, you know, we have an English privilege problem in the whole discourse. But it's just interesting to note that when you're doing gender inclusive language in German, you don't just have to worry about pronouns. You got a lot more to pay attention to. So make sure you're noting that. Okay, so what is it that is leaving the female and male readers at a loss here? Well, let's keep reading. A kingdom under the rule of priests, or a kingdom in which all are priests. At this alternative, now you got to skip past the verb for a second to get your subject, the recent history of research appears to end. Or you might just say, the recent history of research appears to amount to this alternative. The path from the philological exegetical differentiation to alternative formulations, such as hierarchy versus priestly people, or even special versus general priesthood, appears to be not long. Therein, or in this, or in that, or something, okay, but it's referring back to what's just been shown in the previous couple sentences. So in this, deuten, this is actually the verb andeuten. Don't ever forget to look for your separable components at the end of the clause. They're always hiding over there, messing you up, okay? Andeuten, which means something like to indicate. Sich here is telling you that this is going to be a reflexive form of the verb, and when this is reflexive, in order to translate this particular reflexive verb, you kind of have to use a passive in English, and so you're just going to say, therein, the function is indicated, which, now you're in a relative clause, so your verb's going to be down here at the end, okay, werden, and that's working with this participle to make another passive construction, is, what do you call it, assigned, is assigned frequently, let's say, with this adverb, we'll pick that up, okay? So, therein is indicated the function which this text and its New Testament reception is frequently assigned in current or modern debate about the question of office, the role of laity, and the character of the church. Okay, well, we made it to the end. I hope you found that helpful with the explanations and so forth, but you probably also just want to see like a clean translation that you can compare with the German if you're really using this to kind of aid you in understanding what's going on. And so I have provided that in the description of the video. I hope you found it helpful, and please do like and subscribe and share and all those good things. See you next time.